This is too funny. Remember I showed you the other day it had no roots? Well, guess what? You can root a tomato. I stuck it over here because they chewed the bottom. See how the bottom's all chewed up? See if you can see that. But look at this. It sat in here for just 2 days while I was working on that. And now, boy, it's so determined. I'm going to have to find a bucket and stick it in there. I mean, what are you going to do? It's a determined plant. So this was a volunteer tomato that had come up in the middle of the yard. I was going to leave it. I put a basket there thinking that maybe with a tomato cage it would make it. But some mole came by, chewed the whole bottom. As you can see, that's when I found it. It had fallen over, stuck it in the fountain there, and in 2 days it was loaded with roots. So we kind of named it, all of us, Tommy the tomato, and I decided to let's see if we can give it some life and give it a new home, and well, it really wants to grow. So as I work around the yard, I usually have buckets and I collect leaves, and it just so happens I've got this beautiful green bucket with holes. Look at that. About 1.5 inches, 2 inches up. Oh, there's a little water in there. So what I'm going to do, it's already got all that leaf matter in there. I'm going to move Tommy, the tomato plant, that started to grow in this fountain here that needs a good scrubbing to get rid of the beautiful green algae. Gonna move Tommy in here and see if it makes it, and we'll put Tommy maybe on that tree stump there. It might be a little tipped, but you know what? If you can grow tomatoes upside down, which I do not, some people do, you most certainly can grow a tomato slightly tipped. So let's see what happens, and I'll just get it in here and I'll get some soil. Obviously it was growing in that soil, so I might just put some of that soil in here from the mole that has been digging up the ground here, and then just give it a good watering and move Tommy on his own tree stump and see how it does. And I'll use one of these tomato cages since they're here and they were free, so I'll recycle those. See what the mole did? He loosened up. This soil was hard as a rock. This is what it was supposed to be like, really hard. But the mole's been traveling around here. He must like the trough, and moles do that. So we'll put that in there and give it a good watering. And then we'll move Tommy there. Look at this. I didn't do this. The mole did that. But I do want to get some more other things in here. Even though there's a lot of leaf matter and stuff on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and add in some more from the tree collar. Here, we could do that right now. This is how you can plant a plant and save money. I still could put the potting soil on the top. I don't know if I'm going to bother, but look at all the leaves. Yellow leaves are gold. Oh my goodness, if I can get back there. I've got a whole bunch back there to get, which I'll get later. But all through here, the plant doesn't need it, and the plant is taking care of leaves and pulling water up, nutrients up, but it doesn't need it. This will break down and make beautiful soil for that tomato plant. But look at all this. I'm walking here and I'm kind of collapsing because he's got tunnels all over. Don't worry, we're not going to hurt him. They move so quickly. They're basically blind moles. And the moles go underneath pots. Sometimes, see, I don't know at all where he's at, but sometimes you pick up a pot and you might see him. But usually they'll move by the time, like he could be under here. I don't think so. But see the dirt he's moved? All this, he's been really busy. They like damp soil because they can move around, and they like loose soil. And this was not loose. He made it loose. So he's been working under the pots because I had all these pots laying here. All right, so let me get this poor tomato plant planted. Here's the bucket, and I put this in there. And now I'm waiting for that to settle, and once it settles, I'll get Tommy in here. Oh, it's quite wet. Maybe I should do that sooner than later. So there's Tommy. We're going to take off the bottom leaf. We don't need that. We can just throw that on the ground. And we'll take off the one on this side too. You know, I might take another one. Put it in the tote there. Let's see, that one's kind of long. We'll take off a couple leaves because it doesn't need all these leaves. Now what I'm going to do is just put it in here and then cover it with soil. I'll move it over a little bit more in the middle. It's hard to do it. I don't have a tripod for my phone. Let me see. But now I've got leaves and everything in here. I'm not sure exactly how I want to put them in there. In the middle the best I can. But see how the roots are growing on this? It's growing all the way up, and it will go all the way up to here, the roots on this one. You can see the roots. Let's see if you can see it before I put them in there. It's not damaged. There's no damage on there. Those two can grow roots, but nothing else. So I don't need to have it all grow roots, but I think I'm going to put it in probably like this and bury it a little bit more. Let me get this planted, and then I'll show you. See how I dug the hole? Now we can start to put soil in there and push the soil back and try to get it as centered as possible. And that should be really good. So Tommy lost a lot of its leaves because I took them off and threw them in the tote. I'm still adding in a little bit more soil. I got to give it another good watering. Now I'll have to make sure this plant gets watered constantly because it started to grow roots in water. So that's what it's used to right now. Plus it's used to bad soil because that's where it came up, right in the middle of the yard in hard soil. And then the mole came by and ate it. So we'll get this planted, and then I'm going to do a couple other little tricks to keep this plant alive. Now I found this pot that I wasn't using. Actually, I was going to make a water fountain out of it. It says grow, and because of that, it will make this tomato plant grow. So we're going to put it this way so we can see it when we come back here and look at Tommy. Actually, that is not at all the reason it's going to make Tommy grow. I'm going to load this up, and that's going to be how I'm going to water Tommy. You'll see when I'm finished, and you'll understand that this is a good, sure way to save a lot of plants that probably weren't going to grow. So you know how I love the layer, and that's what this flower pot is doing. So I'm taking the flower pot here and filling it up with leaves. I use tree-colored leaves, but you can use kale, or I prefer brassicas, but you could put anything in there. And I'm going to stuff the bottom with torn up leaves, green, yellow, brown. Then I'm going to cover them. Why? What do I always say? Nothing's going to break down on the top, only what's underneath. So you've got to cover those leaves so they start to break down. This is going to bring the microbes to start to decay those leaves. And as those leaves decay, it's going to create a constant food source for the plant. Basically, plant food slowly leaching out onto the roots of the tomato plant. It also will keep it damp. And in the meantime, leaves aren't going to attract anything to the flower pots. You can leave it open, water the flower pot, and the only things that may come to it are earthworms, and that is perfect. So basically, you're composting in place. You're going to use the flower pot to water the tomato plant. It will create dampness underneath, and the tomato plant won't dry out, and it will grow. So I'm getting ready to plant my trough, and I realized I didn't finish Tommy. So to close this out, it's been only just barely a week. Look at this. Look how big this plant has gotten. I protected it with tulle. I didn't want anything to bother the tomato plant. And see the pot in there? It's wet. You'll see it later more as I uncover it. The other thing I've got to do is I've got to trim a lot of this back so I can get here, and I've got dragon fruit. The plant is growing everywhere. I'm going to cut that, but I don't want to cut it yet. I'm getting close because I'm going to take the cuttings. I'm going to plant that. So let's keep an eye on this tomato because my goodness, Tommy is already showing signs of growing tomatoes. Is that cool? And I might leave the tool on for a little bit because all I did was drape it around, put a little paper fastener there to hold it, and let me tell you something, nothing's crawled in there because none of the critters, including snails, don't like climbing on tulle. Snails will go the other way if they feel tulle, but if they don't have any other direction, then they'll go over it. So everything has stayed out of there, so that's been really good. Let's keep an eye on Tommy, and we'll look back in a couple weeks. Have a wonderful day, and don't forget to eat what you grow. And now I got to get this thing planted.